Afternoon, everybody. Thanks for attending our work session this afternoon to meet with April Long and Dave Myler from our wonderful new West Mountain Regional Housing Coalition and find out what we can do to make this a more successful venture. So I don't know what the order is here, David, whether you want to launch or whether Michelle, you want to manage this, or how do you want to go about it?
I was kind of giggling that I'm listed on there, because my whole role is to invite Bob to come.
Okay.
So I've done that. We have a Bob member here, and I'm out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as the Basalt representative of the West Mountain Regional Housing
Yes,
Coalition,
and also-
I would like to introduce
Yes.
April and David, who are going to talk to us today about the organizations and how we started and where we've come from and where we are now.
And we'd be remiss to not welcome April, and I think we're all pretty pleased to hear about your career expansion. I'm not sure what it is exactly, but it's great because you've done great stuff wherever you've been involved. So this is encouraging for all of us. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Very sweet.
Well, I'm going to spend a few minutes just giving you a little background on how we got here, and then April's going to talk about the programs that we're attempting to obtain funding for and implement. As everybody in the workforce housing business, funding is a pretty critical ingredient. I like to say we only have two problems when it comes to housing the workforce: money and NIMBYs, and that's turning out to be true. But anyway, as some of you may recall, the West Mountain Regional Housing Coalition sort of evolved out of a failed effort to form a multi-jurisdictional regional housing authority about 5 or 6 years ago. It seems like yesterday, but fortunately we did have this opportunity to evolve. I remember running into Bill Lamont, who some of you may know, who's no longer with us, in the city market in Carbondale one day, and he said, "David, we got to do something about affordable housing." And he was standing in front of rows of Cheerios, and we started talking about it. One thing led to another, and we put together an effort to create this multi-jurisdictional housing authority. And I appeared in front of every jurisdiction in the valley, created an intergovernmental agreement between every jurisdiction in the valley, but at that time, there just wasn't the political will to create that kind of an authority. But we created enough interest in a regional approach to resolving housing matters that we ultimately evolved into the creation of what we have today, which is a nonprofit corporation which includes Basalt and all of the other local governments in the valley except Garfield County, and as qualified as a 501c3 so that contributions are tax deductible, and created a vision and a mission to try to approach the production of workforce housing on a regional basis. You know, I've always believed that this region is truly one community that is held together and linked together by a very mobile workforce. There are clearly differences, political differences, economic differences, lifestyle differences, but we're all kind of held together by the fact that this workforce that we have travels up and down the valley through all of our communities. And the housing problems of each of the cities, towns, and counties don't stop at the borders, and neither do the solutions. So it made sense that we would try to do what we could to find solutions that would work on a regional basis. You know, all of these communities up and down the valley do have one thing in common, in addition to being connected by a workforce, and that is the fact that that workforce is stressed. And I'm not telling you anything you haven't already heard or don't already know, but people are paying way too much for housing. They're driving way too far every day to get to and from work, and many of our working residents are living in deplorable conditions. One of the benefits that came out of the effort to form the Regional Housing Authority was that all the local governments contributed to the cost of a very comprehensive regional housing needs analysis that was done by Economic Planning Systems out of Denver. It's an incredibly thorough study that we're still using today on a regular basis. And one of the main things that came out of it was that it identified at that time in 2019 a 4,000 unit shortfall in the region. 4,000 units we needed. That doesn't mean that there's 4,000 people out there today looking for housing. What it means is that they're paying too much for their housing, they're driving too far, the housing is not acceptable. And we need to create 4,000 units, at least in 2019, to make up that shortfall. Given the unprecedented increase in property values over the last few years, that number has got to be quite a bit higher. And so the crisis that we have that the governor just described as existential in his meetings with educators down in Glenwood last week is getting worse. And the need for a regional approach, I think, is getting even more serious. So the coalition actually was formed in March of 2022. We're a pretty new entity, and I think there are some slides up. Oh, there they are. And we initially called it the Greater Roaring Fork Housing Coalition. And after meeting with the communities in the Colorado River Valley, we decided to be a little more inclusive and change the name to West Mountain Regional Housing Coalition. Those communities have not yet decided to join the coalition, but the invitation is out there, and they want to wait and see what we're going to be accomplishing before they sign up. But anyway, we've made the effort to be more inclusive. And as it says on that first slide, you know, we believe a regional approach leverages the skills and resources of our community and is really the foundation for increasing affordable housing. The coalition is itself a resource, not only for its members, but for all of the organizations that are committed to and engaged in increasing the supply of workforce housing. And you can see on the second slide who the current members are. And as I said, we are 501c3. So basically, since we got started, and I think our first actual board meeting was in June of last year. So we're still, you know, getting our feet wet and figuring out what we're going to do when we grow up. But we have been able to obtain funding from our members, including Basalt, in 2023, and we're going to double that in 24. We've hired our first staff person to be the program director, or programs director, plural, because we're hoping to do more. We've completed a strategic plan that was funded with a DOLA grant. There was a housing program toolkit process that was underway, managed by, I think it was Pitkin County, but involved all the jurisdictions in the valley when we formed. And so we finished that and created a lot of useful, or assembled a lot of useful information that will be helpful us moving forward with our programs. We got a $100,000 grant from the IHOP grant, which was managed by Chaffa. I think it came from DOLA, however. And we retained Williford and Company. Willa Williford, who some of you may know, who's very capable in terms of analyzing community issues and coming up with solutions. And they're getting close to completing what we're calling a regional scan, an availability scan, and inventory market study on rental housing in particular, and an analysis of the land use codes up and down the valley in order to allow us to suggest solutions, or not solutions, but improvements in land use regulations up and down the valley that would be helpful in promoting affordable housing. The reports are coming out soon, and we're going to have a forum in Carbondale at the Third Street Center in the middle of November to present all of these studies and analysis that I think would be very helpful to you guys in terms of dealing with whatever you want to do in the affordable housing arena. And that's one thing to remember about the coalition. We're not competing with our members. We're trying to find solutions that you're not already working on and be a resource to help you with those solutions. In particular, finding funds. As April will describe in a little more detail, our top programs right now, which we like to describe as development neutral, because they don't call for new development. They call for programs that will allow us to increase the supply of workforce housing without building any, by preserving the existing inventory that we have in the communities up and down the valley through a buy-down program, through a rental assistance program, and a program to incentivize ADUs and additional bedrooms within communities. So with that, I mean, if anybody wants to talk any more about the background and the formation of this organization, I'm happy to do it. I've forgotten more than I ever knew about that background over the years, but I think, you know, from what I've been able to observe, we have an incredibly talented, dedicated, committed board of directors on the coalition that are working extremely hard to find solutions to these problems and to share those with everybody that's involved in the game. And with that, maybe April can tell us a little bit more, provide a little more detail on some of these programs.
Yeah, I can.
But interrupt me
Yeah.
for questions or if you have any.
Yeah, my intent is just to present for about 5 or 10 more minutes, and then we have plenty of time for questions for all of you, so keep thinking of those. Thanks for having me here, and thanks for the kind words, Mayor. I've met most of you, but there are a couple of you that I look forward to working with and meeting, and then I look forward to working with all of you in this new role. It's incredibly exciting to begin with this organization that, when I was first interviewing, had kind of introduced themselves as brand new, but once I have started working with them, they have a lot that is already rolling and in place, which is very encouraging, very stabilizing for someone who's left their job to join the organization. As David said, the board is comprised of staff and elected officials from your jurisdictions that are already working extremely hard on solving workforce housing problems in your jurisdictions. They're extremely talented and dedicated, and so they have put together a lot of information, and we are beginning to roll that information out. Also, like David said, the focus for us for the next few years is certainly to be development neutral. So we are trying to be, like, you know, kind of, sometimes people describe things as an umbrella organization. I think we're kind of like a net organization to find all the pieces that might be falling through the cracks and work on those. And work on those with a regional and a community focus instead of geographic designations. So what we found is that our jurisdictions are working hard and fast on building and new construction of affordable housing. And so we are maintaining development neutral at this point. There are 4, from what I understand or what I'm learning, is there's 4 big ways to work on affordable housing. That's through conservation of existing housing, conversion of existing housing from market housing into affordable housing, construction, the one that we're kind of putting to the side for now, and then the codes, creating the correct environment so that affordable housing can really take root. And then the study that David also mentioned and our strategic plan kind of laid out this toolkit of all the different options that other organizations, other places across the country are examining. And the board decided to whittle that down, and I'll show kind of a little matrix in just a second of how they did that. But they landed in 3 programs that hit 3 big areas. So helping renters, helping buyers, and helping current homeowners convert, providing them with funding that would help them convert a portion of their home into an ADU or an apartment that would be restricted to a local resident, and thereby helping them with some of their income so that they can continue to stay in this area. And then also this idea of codes and creating the right environment for affordable housing. So those are the 3 focus areas of our programs. This is the matrix that I was talking about how the board walked through this with lots of different options to consider where they could have the most impact. And that led to the selection of the 3 programs that I'll talk about tonight. Sorry, I can give you all of this information so you can dig further into it if you're data driven. So the 3 programs that we want to highlight are our buy down deed restriction program, a rental assistance program, and an ADU attached dwelling unit program. The first program that we have already built out the guidelines on is the buy down program. So this is modeled after something from Eagle County. I am learning that Eagle County is the foremost expert in affordable housing. They have a lot of programs that are very attractive and are very successful. And so we're using them as a model for a lot of the programs that we're looking into. Their program is called the Good Deeds Program, and so we're modeling this after that. It's to create more deed-restricted housing units without constructing them. So you would have a buyer for a home that couldn't afford a home. So for me, for example, if I could not afford $1 million home, our coalition would offer to buy down the price of that home. So let's say we bought it down to an $800,000 home. In exchange for a deed restriction on that home, a price cap deed restriction, that keeps that home forever in the affordable housing market. And so that's the gist of the buy down program. We're looking at the entire geographic area for our coalition, so that's all the way from Parachute up to Aspen. You're only required to live and work in this area to be considered for this program. And we do have in the buy down program guidelines that I attached to the memo, which gives a lot more detail. There's some flexibility in how our participants can participate in that. So our member jurisdictions and how they participate. There's some flexibility in those guidelines. And we have coalition members that are already ready to fund this buy down program. We have been seeking state and federal funding assistance for this program that has not been successful yet. And the reasons for that, from what I understand, is that one, federal and state funding a lot of times are tied to the area median income, and they don't want to fluctuate very far beyond those. In our region, we do have a problem, but not a huge problem with the ability to, like, our median income looks decent, especially according to the rest of the country. The problem is that our market doesn't match our median income at all. Like, if you make the median income, you can't afford the median home on the market. And so that separation is why we're not receiving funding from the federal government for programs like this. And then our state funding programs, really they were looking at a revolving grant program, and we could not figure out how to make this program revolve in meeting the goals of the coalition for what we were trying to do for the program, and then meeting the goals of the state for them wanting it to revolve and wanting it to be for a low AMI. So there are coalition members that are ready to fund this buy down program themselves rather than waiting for state and federal funding on that. We have a rental assistance program. This is the one that we need to build out our program guidelines for next, but the intent of this program would be to help renters get into a rental. So as all of you know, that the first, last, and deposit can at times cost people between $10,000 and $20,000 in this area. And that's not a lot, that's more money than people have on hand. And so the rental assistance program would be to grant or loan that funding to a potential renter so that they can get into the rental assistance and then potentially pay that, or get into the rental and then potentially pay that back. And then our ADU program would be looking for a current homeowner that's interested in receiving funding from the coalition. So let's say $100,000 to modify the basement in their house, to build it out so that they could then take on a renter. And then they would be required to restrict that rental just to someone local, for example. And so we need to build out the guidelines of that program. But those are the 3 programs that we're focusing on for the next few years. Before I go to questions, I just want to talk about the other piece of information that David mentioned. We are rolling out the results of the IHOP program, and that is going to show a current snapshot of our rental market. So I think that we have lots of individual understandings of the data in our own individual areas. This is looking regionally, and it's also looking directly at that disparity between what our income is and what is on the market that's available for people in that income. So you can begin to see, we actually need 25 units for people that make this income to be able to afford it. And so it's matching that up. So that's part of the rollout. A land availability analysis, so looking at what land is available for public entities, and then with a little bit of a heat map on that shows these are close to transit, these already have utilities, things that would be idyllic for building and constructing housing. And then also a pipeline analysis, so looking at what housing is already being built or is planned to be built and looks very hopeful that it's going to be built, so that we can better understand the gap that we might have in and exactly where we need to be thinking about converting or finding additional housing. That IHOP program is going to be rolled out in a large regional forum in November. I think the date's going to be November 15th, and all of you will be invited. We'll also be invited lots of other staff and professionals in the housing industry to hear that information all at once. But then I and the consultants will be available to come to each of our jurisdictions individually to tell you specifically what it means for Basalt, for example. And so after that initial rollout, then we'll be coming back. We can come back to you and present your information and take your questions individually. And then later in the winter, we'll be coming back to you all with the code analysis. So our consultants have looked at what codes you have in place and provided recommendations for how those might need to be shifted or changed in order to be more affordable housing friendly. So we'll be doing that in the winter. And then the other big thing I'll be working on this fall and this winter, we'll be working with David on identifying other funding options. So looking at creative funding for the coalition and for this, for the programs that we're hoping to roll out. I think that's everything I wanted to go through.
Well, you mentioned something that I've been focused on as well, and that's land banking. And it's partly driven by the fact that the legislation that came out of Proposition 123 has a land banking grant or forgivable loan program in it. And we think there's going to be substantial funds available. So our focus are those main three items that April described for you, but I think we're going to add this fourth item of looking at these maps that have been put together by our consultants and seeing if we can identify locations that could be eligible for land banking grants and try to tie up some property to move into the next phase once we move from development neutral to actually producing some housing, probably in partnership with employers or the local governments where they fit, and we would be sort of the catalyst for that.
One thing I think that didn't get mentioned is one of our board members is CMC, so we're not all jurisdictions, and there is the likelihood of potential new members coming on that are not jurisdictions. So I just wanted to be clear that when we say regional, we don't necessarily mean like we're just a region of governments, but that also we're looking at bringing on other board members who have regional interests.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for that.
I think that would be my biggest question, is that I feel that, seeing CMC on there is great. They're a great local employer, but I feel like a lot of the employee housing is taxed on the jurisdictions, and there are groups that have built their own stuff, but I feel like the employers are a very substantial thing that get missed in this conversation, that you know, they need the employees, their employees can't afford to live here. You can't, as in a business, you can't afford to pay a living wage to afford a $20,000 deposit for a rental. There's something missing in this nexus where the employers don't get off the hook, but there is some like missing section there where employers aren't talking together, and I don't know, I just feel like we leave some stuff on the table. I mean, an example would be the Ski-Co building. It was built in this vacuum of what Ski-Co needed, and if you look at how much square foot they left on the table, you know, if they could have partnered with a couple other people, could we have done it different? I don't know, I just worry that we're not creating these systems where people can talk and say, yeah, I need that too, or like, there's banks out there, the hospital, multiple small businesses that I'm sure would jump in to get involved in what you guys are doing. And I'm sure you're reaching out to them, but I would encourage.
Well, we're designing that program as we speak, because the employers really have stepped up in a big way up and down the valley in providing housing for their employees. But that's really not what they do. And so if the coalition can organize the employer community in a better way to assist them or partner with them or provide opportunities for them to simply contribute to the gap between what it costs to build the housing and what it can sell for, similar to what Habitat is doing up and down the valley, that's going to provide a huge opportunity for funding and production for the benefit of the employers. I think the employers will fund that. I think that they would be willing to create some sort of an investment fund or investment trust that they can contribute to close the gap and provide a supply of housing, not only for their employees, but for employees up and down the valley. Public sector employers, private sector employers, large and small, I think they all contribute to some sort of a trust fund to create the economic engine that we need to make this work.
And if that was part of your presentation, I'm sorry that I missed your side of it, but I just.
We didn't present it yet,
Okay.
it's part of the what's coming next.
Okay.
Yes, so you just hit the nail on the head of what we're beginning
Right.
to work on.
Okay.
Yeah, and we certainly, like, in the short time that I've been there, employers are reaching out to me to see how do we get involved? What can we do? How can you help us? And so David has a great idea that we're working on.
Awesome.
And the development community as well, that we have one example here in Basalt that we've negotiated with Eagle County and another one with Garfield County, where the developers, instead of building housing, mitigation housing on site, are contributing to the gap for in a habitat project that's being built, one in Rifle and one in Glenwood. So there's ways to get the development community and the employer community to participate financially to close the gap and allow us to create more housing. So all of those strategies are on the table, and I'm glad you're thinking that way, because that's exactly right.
We have to. I mean, I think any of us could see it at any place, restaurant, buying groceries.
Right.
I mean, I think we're in for a huge reckoning, and I really appreciate what you guys are working on.
You know, David, we've sort of explored some things, and I think on the rental side, we explored what turned out to be probably an extraordinarily cumbersome, kind of clumsy solution. But anyway, like what Churchill say about Americans, they'll ultimately
It's
do
like
the.
they'll eventually get it right.
They'll ultimately do the right thing after they tried everything else. So,
They
you
failed
know,
at
we
everything
were,
else, yeah.
we really spent some time thinking about buy downs for rental. Like, and we specifically worked on Stotts Mill, and we were thinking what would be exactly the subsidy required as an upfront cash payment to a developer to reach some AMI targets for ongoing rental. So it basically would be we would be buying a rent limitation program. But I just have to say, the direct rental assistance looks much more nimble and sensible and doable. So I think unless anybody else thinks differently, I think we basically ran that to the ground, and the prices were high. I mean, it was pretty expensive to cover all of a developer's concerns and give
Right.
them a comfort level that, they would be achieving enough in the way of rental income to amortize debt and do all the rest of the stuff they have to do. So that is something we're not gonna pursue, but the rental assistance looks pretty good. I mean, it looks like a sensible deal. A question about it, and unfortunately, once you get into housing, it's just there are like 10,000 what ifs. But how does that program get administered by local housing authorities? And my concern would be that somebody, gets, just pick a number, $500 a month rental assistance, and then we find out that 5 years later, this individual's making 4 times the standard for, target for net annual income. And are we thinking through how those programs will be administered? And so I would be very attracted to the rental assistance, because it gets people that are struggling to get a toehold. It's a bridge,
Right.
and that really makes sense. And the buy down makes sense too. I assume the buy down, is that are the control CPI
Not
index
really.
kind of based limitations, or?
We don't have an appreciation cap on our buy down, do we?
I think so.
Oh, we don't? Okay.
I think so. I would just say that there are flexibilities in it, and
Yeah.
we're working on ironing those out in a way that makes sense for us to administer and makes sense for those that want to participate in the program to participate in it.
Yeah.
And so there's some ironing out that we have to do. When you talked about the rental program, there's like a little shift in, like, some people like the rental program that we've presented because it provides the money up front immediately to the renter. So instead of different thoughts to present it to the landlord or present it to the renter. And then you were mentioning like $500 a month, it would be on this upfront piece, so it'd be a little easier to administer because you wouldn't have to follow that renter. It'd be just to get them into the rental unit, and
Yeah.
then they would cover their rent.
Oh, gotcha.
So it's just so like trying to think about those things, like what's easiest to administer that gets somebody into housing as quickly as possible
Yeah.
for us.
Well, and if
Yeah.
we did find a source of funding for a longer-term rental assistance on a monthly basis, let's say, we obviously are gonna need to continuously qualify those tenants to make sure that they didn't win the lottery or, you
Yeah.
know, double their income and that sort of thing. Because, that just makes sense.
Yeah.
But, and I guess as far as the buy down goes, I was thinking that we were structuring it more like a resident occupied product.
Yeah,
Where
RO
you just
provision.
have to, in order to qualify, you have to be employed within the region, but it'll be like a free market housing for locals.
Yeah.
But if we're able to buy down some of the less expensive units, condominiums and so on, we might put an appreciation cap on them and make sure that they're still affordable to the lower income groups. So those details are still in progress.
Yeah.
And it's gonna be a learning curve. I mean,
One person's observation, the RO looks like it would be a much more attractive opportunity so we avoid the centennials and all the other,
For the buy down program, I know that what we're hoping for is to only qualify the person when they buy.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the idea is that you're providing community housing, not employee housing. So it's not that we would be ensuring that this person works for Basalt forever. It's
Right.
that they did when they bought it, they live here, when they wanna sell it, it's still a deed restricted unit. So the next person it's gonna go to is somebody that works here. but that person could move their employment throughout the community.
Oh, yeah, that's,
Yeah.
yeah,
So that's what makes it look more like a regional coalition than a Basalt Run program.
yeah.
Well, we're also, you know, one of our underlying policies is that we'd like to encourage those situations where people live as close as possible to where they work. It only makes sense. And one of the huge problems that we have in this region is commuting. And you can see it every morning when you try to get on Highway 82. And so there may be some restrictions on how far you can move with a new job from where you're in, or the house that you're in before you have to sell it. We'll create geographic areas to make that work.
Great.
More questions?
Yeah, David?
I was just gonna say, I do like the buy down program in a regional setting. I feel like there's some economies of scale with running it and things like that that you can take advantage of. That'd be harder in a local, in a smaller setting. And I think, just to comment on the RO, and I think that is probably the way to go, just to keep enough downward pressure by having it be RO, but still enable people to, you know, they renovate and they do all the upkeep and they, and also, you know, frankly, generate some wealth, because that's, most Americans, most of their wealth is in their home, and that's, I think, a huge help to them and an incentive them in the community, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, there's a lot of goodness that comes from that, so I think that's definitely a good way to go.
Good thought.
I would also encourage the checking in on people. I feel like, at least from my experience of people I know in the Aspen housing lottery, that there are some that qualify and then 2 years later they've blown out like they would never qualify again. And so then we create this system to create this community, and only some people are benefiting for it. And once you win the lottery, you've won. You're already in. What you know, you took that step, and you know, I just feel like there's abuse in the system, and so I would highly recommend to strategize checks and balances of, you know, it doesn't have to be every year, but you know, maybe go back 3 years and say, hey, like, where are you currently sitting? Like, not to say that you have to kick them out, but there should be at some point where it needs to be used as a stepping stone, because the minute you're committed to cheap housing, you're like, anyone wants to live here cheaply. I think that's the ultimate goal for everyone, right? Like,
Right.
we all, I think we have infinite demand and very low supply. And so that's what we've created, is our own problem. And
Right.
some people got in early, and then COVID blew it up, but there's a very, I don't know, from everything that I can see from the outside of the Aspen Housing Authority, it's a great program, but there's a ton we can learn from it and stuff not to do.
Right.
Like, especially on, you know, David just mentioned it, on upkeep. I mean, there has to be a standard of living, and there has to be, in these HOAs, that all of a sudden they say, oh, we have no money for our HOA. Like, none of the HOAs in Basalt are coming to the town of Basalt and saying, hey guys, not that they're supposed to, but they, like, I feel like there's a side of affordable housing where people get in and it's great and it's affordable, but then there's no accountability on the backside.
Right.
And so then they get to live affordable, but your plumber's not affordable, your electrician's not affordable. It's, and that's not something, you can't subsidize everything. And so I think there is a fine balance we have to live in around here, of a reality of this stuff needs to happen. And if it's not happening, your building's gonna deteriorate. And then, you know, I don't think you as the Regional Housing Authority then wants to be like APSHA and say, oh, well, we just need to fund them more, you know? I don't know, there's some breakdown going on, and
All of those are good comments, and I don't know that I've got specific answers to those issues, but we're aware of them. You know, everybody on this board, myself included, has been in the housing game for a long time and has seen a lot of these things happen. And we understand, you know, some of the issues that are going to come up. And so as we refine our programs, we'll try to address some of those as best we can. And certainly your input and your ideas would be very welcome and very helpful.
I think we really benefit by having Diane Foster representing the city of Aspen, because she's really familiar with the APSHA issues. And then Kim Bell Williams representing Eagle County Housing Authority and all of their programs. She's seen, you know, what works and what doesn't work. So it's been fantastic to have folks that already came with those lessons learned to the board. Sorry, I didn't mean.
Oh, you're good. You're good. I think because the demand thing comes up, and it's really not about the demand of all these people who want housing. It's about what's the demand that the community has for housed people to be in it. Because what we need as far as an economy, a community, you know, essential services, you name it, but there's a demand that comes from that that's not being met, and that's where the supply, that's where the supply focus should be, absolutely.
I agree.
And hopefully that information coming out of the IHOP will paint a really pretty, paint a more detailed picture of that situation.
Cool.
It's not pretty. It's not a pretty picture.
I'm sure
Well, I
it's
think
not
the net
improved.
of it is that we're interested in all three of those programs, I think, you know, who wouldn't be, really, but they're great. I think the rental assistance is kind of a bit of a breakthrough for us, because I think we were making that too hard, and just, you know, funding the employee directly or the resident directly so much more efficient than trying to sign a
Landlord happy.
117-page document that, you know,
Well, and we don't
only
want,
senators could
Yeah.
understand.
we don't want landlords to be like, oh, I'm gonna get a $15,000 windfall, you know, if I up my, you know, first, last, and deposit. So we're looking out for the renter, not the landlord in this case.
Those are good guardrails.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool, well, not to cut this short, sorry, we've got council meeting starting in 12 minutes, and we've got to chow down, so we ought to schedule time to do this again and see how we're doing, you know?
We'll come back, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so
Well,
much for the opportunity.
Everyone's
and,
here invited to the forum.
Everyone's invited to the forum, and I'll send an invitation to all of you, but it'll be, I believe, November 15th in Carbondale.
Great.
And thank you for, you know, all of the support that Basalt has already given to this organization, and thanks
Yeah.
for Elise's commitment to being on our board. It's been incredible to see this working.
Yeah.
And there's a great response from the community. They're so appreciative that all of our jurisdictions are thinking broader than just their own. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good deal.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the October 10, 2023 meeting of the Basalt Town Council. So we've just completed a great work session with our West Mountain Regional Housing Coalition with some very helpful and encouraging progress being made. So that was good deal. So we start our meeting with a roll call. Pam?
Absolutely. Let us begin with Dieter Schindler.
Present.
Angela Anderson.
Here.
Glenn Drummond.
Here.
David Knight.
Here.
Elise Hoddle.
Present.
Brian Slack.
Here.
And Bill King.
Here.
A-team is present, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Consent agenda. So we have 3 items on our consent agenda tonight. Minutes from September 26th, and then a continuation of our public hearing for ordinance number 22 to the October 24th meeting, and then approve special event activity permit for the leaf drop on Midland Spur. Sarah's doing that. She collects all these leaves. It's amazing.
Big leaf collector.
So,
She likes to bathe in them.
if there are no questions, can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Mayor, I move that the town council approve the consent agenda as items as presented.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye, great. So, our next order of business is call to the public. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address council on a matter that's not scheduled for the later in the meeting? Anyone calling in? Does not appear the case. If you're watching and you do want to address town council, go to www.basalt.net and follow directions for logging in, and you will be admitted to the meeting by our town clerk. So, hearing no call to the public, we have mayor and council reports and comments. Anyone?
I'd just like to thank Chief and all his staff. They are all over the town. I see them on my little street all the time. They stop, they're super nice. They help with the amazing homecoming parade. I just know they're out there, and I really appreciate seeing them, and all my interactions are great, so
Yeah.
just to pass that out.
Yeah,
And
that's great.
I'll thank English in Action for the Fiesta de Tamales.
Great.
That was a great event at the end of the month, and looking forward to next year.
Nice.
And I'll thank town staff for decorating for the fall with pumpkins and hay bales, and I've seen several Facebook comments of people saying that they appreciate it.
Awesome, good. That's a Chris Pfizer special.
So are we participating in the weird pumpkin locations on the Frying Pan River?
No,
Right,
no,
no,
we are
that's-
not.
that's
Yes,
a-
that is still a mystery as to who does that.
That's the great pumpkin.
Pretty amazing event.
Mhm.
So I would like to recognize our contractor for getting the mag chloride down, controlling dust. This is just a tough deal. These lines now are pretty big. I mean, the water line was easy compared to these connections, so. But they're doing well. It seems like they're getting, one trench for 2 connections. That's pretty good. 2 first, so that's
There's
hope-
2 trenches there.
hopeful. What's that?
There's 2 trenches like this right
Yeah,
now.
I know, I saw that.
There will be some of those efficiencies, though.
Yeah. But, thanks to Shay and the crew for, moving fast and, they're being cordial with everyone. So if there are no other comments, Mr. Manager, do you want to?
I do have a
Address
couple
council.
things for you. I'll be brief. So the first is just to bring to your attention, we made a donation recently out of our post funds, so Parks, Open Space, and Trails. So we made a $15,000 donation to the trail construction effort that's happening up on Crown Mountain. So on our side of the mountain, there are a few trail extensions currently happening. So one is called Imperial Garden, and that actually is a climbing trail that takes you all the way to the top of the crown. So if you start at Hook Spur and climb up to the top. You can get a 3,000-foot vertical climb in.
Holy mackerel.
And then you have a machine-built trail all the way back down to the Rio Grande Trail. So pretty incredible infrastructure that's going in right here in our backyard. So they're actually pretty close to done. That it's got some fine tuning and things like that, but that is now added miles. I'm not exactly sure how many, but probably somewhere on the order of 5 to 10 miles of
Whoa,
additional trail.
that's
up there.
big.
So
Is
pretty cool.
Imperial Garden goes to the top of Aston somewhere?
it takes off from the top of Aston.
Oh, so you.
So right as Aston that reaches its apex by the cattle guard, if you start, you can start climbing from there.
Wow.
And then it kind of wends itself around up to the top. And then from there, you actually have a choice to drop over to the Carbondale side. You can drop and kind of come back around on any Audi and those loops, or end up winding your way back down, and you can choose to take Baston, or you can choose to take the new machine-built trail. So pretty awesome stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, just as an update for that, that went through post, and I think that's a great contribution for us. And then just a quick reminder, I believe it's Dieter, David, and Glenn who are the review committee for our grants, the discretionary grants. So I'll be reaching out to you guys. That grant program is active now. It's on our website. It closes on the 31st of October. So we'll meet sometime in early November and go through those grants similarly to how we did
And for
last
the
year.
public, would you remind folks, what are the qualifications to apply?
Yeah, so those are discretionary grants, usually in the order of, anywhere from up to $5,000. Usually they probably average more $2,000, and they're for nonprofits. And it's sort of a smattering of nonprofits, everything from ski trails to kids programs in the schools, to mental health support. So, and music, and lots of different things. And lots of times it's viewed as seed money for them. So the more that these organizations get support from the governments, then they can kind of use that as leverage to get other monies elsewhere. So it's been a long-standing program and a great one for us to contribute to. So, and then two more quick things. As you know, up on in sort of the Old Town part, on West Sopris, we've had a lot of water coming down this summer. We've got some very active springs up there. We've investigated that pretty deeply to try to figure out what is happening up there. We are going to be doing a construction project starting next week. The Stutzman Gerbaz is going to be helping us with it, and that is to basically take the water that's coming over onto the road, and we're going to be adding a culvert. So it'll go into our existing storm drainage. We're hoping that that'll abate in the not too distant future as CPW finishes up work that they've been doing. We'll see how that goes. We have had evidence that the mountain is pretty saturated generally, so I think there's a few things at play here, but something that we can control down on our property at the very least. So that'll start next week. And then on East Sopris, we've had a pretty active spring as well, and that's coming all the way down onto East Sopris Creek. So after the fire, we had a spring pop up, and then we were trying to figure out what are we going to do this winter. So Catherine went up there with some of our public works crew, and while we had done some testing earlier on, we kind of went up above this spring, and there was some additional water. We tested it for chlorine, and there was chlorine in it, which indicates that it's treated water. So we've been looking at the Bassburg neighborhood. That's where the water's likely coming from. Unfortunately, it's also PVC pipe without a tracer wire on it. So trying to figure out exactly where the water line is challenging, but we are now bringing in our third locator who has some pretty advanced equipment to locate PVC pipe. And then we also have two curb stops up there that cannot be turned off, and those are ownership of the Bassbergs. So they're getting a bid that should be in tomorrow to dig those up and replace them so that they work. So we're playing a game of isolation and, just trying to figure out where it's coming from, because we want to get it fixed before the winter. So, anyway, we have a bit of a compounding problem up there. So, more to come on that as we learn a little bit more. But that puddle on East Sopers I passed by last Friday after work, and it was kind of a big one.
I'll let you know my kids will be slightly disappointed if you take it away, because it's our morning urban safari, full blast.
Is it starting to slow down at all?
No.
No.
If anything, it's
The
fine.
leak portion, probably not. The spring portion, hopefully, if we get the leak fixed, then that'll be remedied for the,
Jeez.
going into the future. So yeah, that's the background of what we know so far on that one.
Okay.
Perfect storm. So that's it. Thanks.
All right, thanks. Presentations. Next order of business is the Hope Center update. So Ryan and Michelle were going to talk to us about that. Hi.
So I'll just do a quick introduction. This is Michelle Muthing. Most of you have seen her present and
Yes.
met her in the past. She's the executive director of the Aspen Hope Center, which is located here just off of Midland in the River Rock development. We've had a pretty long-standing relationship with them. They have helped us tremendously and have a good partnership with our police to help with crisis response. And then a few years ago, we rolled that into a tobacco tax grant whereby we provided $150,000 per year for 3 years. That allows for people that work here, people that live here to get counseling for free. And you can see from her report that some of those have been on a sliding scale based on ability to pay. And then the Hope Line is another component of that that's open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with a licensed clinician that allows for people to call in if they're having a tough time. So with that, I'll turn it over to Michelle. So.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the ability to be able to come and talk to you a little bit about what last year has held. We are 13 years old. We are proud to still be the small little agency that we are, although as you can see, we've grown from a $360,000 budget 13 years ago to a $4 million budget today. So we're small at heart, but we're not small. The funding that we get from the town of Basalt is integral to our survival. The bigger we get, the more we get pulled into other places. But I really wanted to focus on some of the key crisis highlights from last year. You'll notice in what I printed out, our small little sliver of Basalt encompasses our larger footprint that goes from Aspen to Parachute. And so this gives you just a little highlight of what we do in our little area here. Our office is here. We are happy to call Basalt home. Our longest standing police relationship is with Basalt Police Department and is still today one of our strongest. Our 3 schools in the valley or in the town, we serve with a clinician and they work tightly with crisis. And it's an area that we are deeply committed to. With our response from last year, we have noticed overall in the valley in general, and Basalt is not immune, to a rise of crisis calls and calls for assessments for children that are younger and younger. It's an alarming thing we are all having to work with. But the other piece to that is the adults and the parents that are trying to support their kids. So we try to look at our services as a crisis continuum. Our school program is our preventative arm. Our crisis response is our response and intervention piece. And our recovery is trying to keep people out of the hospital. And you'll notice that we had a good number of folks that came through last year just from this area for therapy that we were able to put on a sliding scale. We kept over 40 people out of inpatient admission last year. 3 of them were Basalt residents. And our numbers continue to rise. We took on a state contract in 2019. We were the first nonprofit in the state to do that. We took on a crisis contract and signed to do the mobile response work in our valley. It comes with a lot of requirements, and they are things that we don't always agree with. And so our local funding is something that we deeply rely on, because we may not always have our state contracts when parameters are such that they don't meet our ethical and professional communication or community partnerships. And I don't know what the future holds with some of those contracts because of those requirements. So it is the funding we get from our local governments that we appreciate more than anything. So I definitely want to say thank you. I could talk all night, as you can imagine, about what we do, but I would like to make sure that I let you ask questions or point out things that are on here, or ask questions about things that are not on here, so that I have the ability to tell you what you are most interested in hearing about. Yes.
My first question would be, what percentage is the state funding of your total?
So for crisis, the state funds about $800,000 of our overall crisis budget, for our 1-point-something million total of it all. And I don't like that it is that much. I would much rather have more local funding for that, because if ever something happened, it is why we don't allocate a third of our budget to cover to be covered by a gala. Many of your big nonprofits in the valley rely on about a third of their budget to come from big galas every year. We have never done that. COVID is a perfect example of why. There were many nonprofits who struggled when COVID hit and they lost a gala. Our gala to us is that excess for things we don't expect. So we have a large amount of money that comes from the state. Other questions?
Questions?
What does ISP stand for?
I'm sorry, say that again?
ISP?
Oh, ISP, our Intensive Stabilization Program. It is our alternative to hospitalization. And so individuals that we see in a time of crisis and do an assessment with, if we can find ways to keep them in the community, find support systems to surround them, we can enter them in therapy within 24 hours. And we can avoid them going to Denver or Grand Junction for inpatient hospitalization. Because we don't have the volume of individuals like a metro area has to put into what they call an IOP, an intensive outpatient program. It's 3 days a week. You come for 3 hours a night. You do groups, you do education, so on and so forth. Because we don't have the volume for that, this is individually tailored to the person, with referrals to resources in the community. We call it human bubble wrap. You have an assessment, you do phone check-ins, you have a support supervisor that we check in with, you start therapy, you're connected to other resources in the community, and it keeps people from having to be transported to the Front Range.
Very cool.
We work very, very hard. As I wrote about that, bless you, as I wrote about that, the intensive stabilization program costs about $1,700 per person to run, and the client pays nothing. The person pays nothing toward that. One of the biggest problems we have in the state is our discharging from our inpatient facilities. They don't do a lot of discharge planning back to a community, and evidence for why we don't like to put people inpatient. We have a woman from Garfield County, actually, that we admitted. She was 72 years old, and they discharged her to the streets of Denver, and she is currently a missing person. Our job is to keep people here, supported by the family and friends that love them. So,
Could you describe a little bit about our PD relationship? Do you work principally with Jason and our school resource officer program, or is it generally across the board you interact
No,
with?
it's generally across the board. All the different officers that are with Basalt PD we work with. Jason is one of the key ones because we're so tightly tied to the school. Funny enough, I was just speaking with him this morning about the SRO's conference and going to do kind of a joint presentation about rural Colorado because most of the conferences focus on the metro areas. So we were just speaking this morning about that. But it is across the board, all of the officers, when the crisis calls come in, the clinicians respond to whatever officer is on. And so they know most all of them. With regard to the school, again, we've had an increased number of threat assessment calls where students are making statements that put other students or the school on alert that there might be some sort of harm done. And so our number of threat assessments have gone up. I know, I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, the number of TikTok things going out had caused a number of incidents at the schools, so we work pretty closely with them on that as well. But Jason is key, but we work equally with most all of them.
How many therapists do you have, and do you feel like it meets the demand that you have for therapy sessions?
It does. That's a really great question. And just a little piece of context. The Aspen Hope Center has been doing mobile crisis since 2010. The state did not recognize or mandate that mobile crisis was done until 2014, and then it wasn't enforced and really put forth until 2019. So this is something we have become experts in doing. We've done it long enough. When we opened, our vow was that we were able to respond on scene within 15 to 30 minutes because, as we all know, dealing with a crisis, you feel like an eternity is happening. So we station a clinician between Aspen and Glenwood, hopefully, so that all of our responses can be within 15 to 30 minutes. We have 9 crisis clinicians to cover our footprint from Aspen to Glenwood. For context, when I get on the calls with the state, most communities have 1 crisis clinician for 3 or 4 counties. So they are driving hours to get to locations. We are an anomaly, and it is priority for us to make sure that officers are not standing on scene. The state contract we have requires we respond within 2 hours. 2 hours is a lifetime to an officer sitting with a suicidal person or a psychotic individual. 2 hours is not okay for us. So again, you'll see our average response time is 13 minutes. Sometimes we're right here in Basalt and it takes 3 minutes. Sometimes we're in Glenwood and it takes 30 or 40. But our goal is to staff appropriately. Are we staffed appropriately to be able to meet that? By and large, yes. 365 days a year are what we have to cover. There are 65 about days in a year where we run ragged. The clinicians work 24-hour shifts, and so they will work 22 out of 24 hours without stopping. The other 300 days are manageable. They go from one thing to the next. So appropriate staffing, we think we're in a good place. One of our requirements from the state required that all responses to the community must be done in pairs. So we did have to staff up for that part because they did want 2 clinicians going versus 1, and the goal of that is to not have law enforcement accompany us, which I have mixed feelings about because they're volatile situations sometimes, and law enforcement is not there to do the assessment. They know that's what we are there to do, but they are there for safety. And that is important to us. And our officers, we are so fortunate to live in a valley with officers that are so community focused. And they know how to help us and they know how to help the community members. So yes, and there's more that's coming. We know that.
Thank you.
I always try to give context because our agency is very, very different. And I don't say that as a pat in the back. It's just we have been doing this for a very long time. And I'm sometimes astounded when I hear other areas and how they have to function compared to how we have the luxury of functioning because we've kind of dialed this in really well.
You had 647 responses last year. What's this year looking like?
Handy dandy computer, real-time data. This year, oh, sorry, that's last year. this year thus far, stand by. To date, this year, 44.
So it's actually gone down.
Sorry, we had 65 last year
Oh,
through 12
sorry.
months. We have 44 thus far this year. What was your, sorry, you were referring to,
In 2022, 647.
oh, in general, 642. Thus far this year, we are at 497.
This is a broad and probably unfair question, but are things getting better?
Are
Or
things
not.
getting better?
That's what I was
What's that?
I was curious that, yeah.
Yeah, what's your take on it? I mean, you know, I'm definitely not in daily contact with kids, and, you know, you just read a lot about cyberbullying and, you know, the cyber silos and the psychological impact all this is having, and is the sort of social condition on the improve or no?
It's a really
It's a tough
It's
question.
a really great question, and I think you could probably divide that into multitudes of angles of what you're looking at that's improving or not improving.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing that we see that's improving, particularly with our crisis, working with our school districts, is our preventative efforts are increasing. What we found, and I'm sure you heard this from Anna Cole when she presented last time, by having specialists who do crisis, by having our clinicians in the schools who can deal with the highest risk kids in the schools, the improvement we now see is that we allow people to get back to doing the job they're really good at. So our school counselors are able to do that preventative measure where before they were doing so much of the crisis. What we find over time, which there is no substitute for time, but we find that our interactions with law enforcement get better and easier the more they get to know us and we get to know them. They know what we do, we know how they function. That gets better over time. And I think overall we've got some infrastructure being built in the agency. I've never really had a group of admin infrastructure that we have now, and I think that only helps to strengthen the agency. And when the agency is strong, it helps to support the people on the front lines to be strong. I think a lot of what we have to see in our community is just the backswing coming up from COVID. People are tired, people are exhausted, and I think you're starting to see a little bit of that positiveness come back in conversation, which is my hope that it continues. And I think the other major thing I am trying to help with a shift on is, you've heard for years, we need to erase the stigma around mental health. We need to get rid of the stigma attached to mental health. And I'm really trying to push the shift that the stigma is diminishing. The fact that we have the mental health groups that we have in the schools, you have commercials, we have the Andy Zenke Youth Program partnering with us to talk about mental health with kids on the radio. You've got galas that are able to be held and people openly talk about therapy and suicide. I firmly believe the stigma is diminishing. And so my push is, rather than saying, you know, we have to get rid of, or there's such a stigma around mental health, I think that is probably the best piece of what is shifting. The stigma is reducing and people are able to talk more openly and freely. I can get up here and publicly say the town of Basalt funds a mental health entity. That's enormous. So there's the best piece of what's shifting.
Everybody on council feeling okay? We good here?
What's really ironic is our flame is our logo, and we realize that we deal with very dark, very hard things. But when you pull our staff together and talk to staff, they are some of the most optimistic, positive-centered individuals, because their job is to pull people to light, to hope. I mean, that's the whole entity title and name. And as much as we live in the world of such dark things that are sad and hard, we have that ability. I focus on staff being able to take care of themselves on their time off, because they have a lot to hold when they come on shift.
Well,
So-
Thanks very much. I mean,
If I may too, you know, we had Anna come the last time and Michelle is here tonight. Both of those contracts will be coming to an end at the end of the year, and it would be staff's recommendation to bring them back to renew them, but we'd do that formally at a subsequent meeting. So long as we get a general nod from you, we can look at those details later.
Great.
And I have real-time data, I have clinicians half a block away. If there is anything else we can ever provide you information-wise, we are an open door. Thank you. What you do
Great.
for us is,
Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you for what you do for the community.
I brought a few of our annual reports we had left over. I'm gonna leave them. They just kind of give an overview of last year in general for all things. I will leave them out at the front.
Okay.
And I thank you very much for the opportunity, for the funding, and for letting us call our office home here in Basalt as well. So we'll wait for the construction and enjoy our new town. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks.
All right. So next order of business, council actions. The first piece is interview and appointment for Basalt Planning and Zoning Commission. So Ben, come on up if you.
I have to follow her. Oh, goodness.
Tough one, luckily.
You know, thankfully, my wife has been working with Michelle since its
Oh,
inception
wow.
for the last 10 years. So,
Oh, my.
you know, she spoke candidly about crisis clinicians on those 65 days that are really tough. And I can remember my wife as a 7 months pregnant driving down to solve someone's crisis.
Wow.
Down the valley. So
That's impressive.
it's an incredible service what the Hope Center provides.
All right.
There's a whole segment.
I'm not gonna cry, just put that out there. Okay. I'm gonna go super dry for a minute to regroup. So Planning and Zoning Commission currently has 7 voting members, 1 alternate member, and 1 open alternate seat. Ben Fierstein and his family are Basalt residents. He has significant development experience in the Orange Park Valley. And he'd like to use his construction and development experience to help guide the future of Basalt, as so many things are happening here. Ben attended the October 3rd P&Z meeting, which was quite juicy, reviewing a sketch plan application that you guys have seen recently. And staff recommends that you interview the applicant, and if you're comfortable, appoint him to a 3-year term as an alternate on P&Z.
Great.
Thank you, Michelle. So yes, I am Ben Fierstein. I've been in the Valley here for 14 years now, living in Basalt for the last 9. I've seen a lot of incredible transition in this town, and my experience here in the Valley has hit all 3 prongs of the construction triangle. I've worked for the municipality at the City of Aspen. I've worked directly for consultants with my background in engineering, and I've also put on the hat of a general contractor for close to a decade. The last 4 years, I've sort of taken all 3 of those prongs and bundled them together and advocated directly and represented owners and developers and family offices here in the Valley and assisting them throughout the process. I think this is an incredible opportunity to advocate here for our community, and that's why I'd like to take on this appointmentship and help assist here to continue this incredible growth that we've seen in an effective manner.
Excellent. Is your background civil engineering?
Correct. My degree is in civil engineering, and out of college I worked for the City of Aspen in their stormwater department, handling some of the engineering items that came through, and then quickly jumped to the dark side and became a contractor.
Great. Well, excellent credentials. Questions from council for Ben?
I'd say thanks for volunteering.
Yeah. Well, we thank you for your interest and, it's fantastic with someone with your background and knowledge of municipal affairs really going to be an asset for our P and Z.
I'm gonna ask, as someone that I think has just gone through planning and zoning in the last year and a half for your project, if I'm correct, on Sopris?
In which project?
No, you don't live at Sopris.
No, I do not live in
Different-
Sopris. I live in the
different
Elk Run area.
guy. Okay. You look like it was free and
Basalt
clear.
activity.
Yes, I'm free and clear of basalt activity. I have done some planning and zoning in Eagle County. I've
never
done
mind.
it in municipalities across the nation. But in basalt, I have no extraneous ties, and I would naturally recuse myself if I did.
Oh, no, it wasn't a question like that, but, well, thank you for volunteering. We appreciate it. Great.
Mayor, I move the town council appoint Ben Fairstein to the Planning and Zoning Commission for a 3-year term to end October 10, 2026.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. We can do this with voice votes, so all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
You're in.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks much, Ben.
Thank you, Michelle.
And once again, compliments to Michelle for filling every board seat imaginable. I think she's starting to
Quite the
make up board seats
I
to
know.
fill. She's running out of film. She's creating alternates to alternates at this point. It's time, guys.
Michelle,
Credit for Ben.
Get her,
was that you out
Ryan,
there?
get her more stuff on the agenda. Come on, what's going on? She's,
Was that you out on Midland Avenue with that, like the wind whippy thing? That was-
I just stand out there
Positions
with
open.
applications.
Very funny. Okay, next item, resolution of the Town Council of Basalt, Colorado adopting additional services. Next one, you're not gonna vote on
I'm
this,
gonna
huh?
recuse myself, actually.
For designs contract for design services for the Midland Avenue Streetscape Project. Catherine and Jeff.
Hi, Mayor and Council. Thanks for having me this evening. We are bringing to you tonight in one resolution, 2 changes for additional services to Connect One Designs contract. As you all know, they are our design lead for the Midland project, and so we initially contracted them for design and then have had an ad services also for them to do construction administration. And so as part of our procurement code, these 2 changes do tip the scales at just over 10% of their contract amount, so that's why we're before you tonight. So the first of which is surrounding the development of the bid documents, where we went out to bid on phase 2 of the project earlier this summer. As you may recall, initially when we went under contract, the intent wasn't to go through a bid process, but inevitably it seemed like that was the right decision for the town. So the additional engineering and design services that weren't contemplated as part of that initial design scope were in addition, that came to $48,000 for that request of work. And the second item that was considered additional services was the full scope of the value engineering process. There was some value engineering that was contemplated in their original contract. However, with the addition of the spur, those efforts were beyond what was initially contemplated. So all of the work that's been going on around the value engineering process was also considered an additional services, and that totaled $101,000. So these are the 2 changes that I'm bringing forward to you tonight, and would seek your approval, and I'm happy to answer any questions you all have about this or otherwise on the project at the moment.
Questions? All right, no questions, I'd entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move that town council adopt resolution number 35, series of 2023.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye, no opposed. Tell Heather Henry that she got approved unanimously. That's the result of the mayor's arm twisting persuasion. Okay, so the next one is resolution number 36, series of 23, resolution of the town council of Basalt, Colorado, approving an exemption from non-residential lighting standards for the Be Human sculpture by Gail Falwell at the Basalt River Park. Great.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So this thing's happening, huh?
This thing is happening. It
look at
is actually under construction at the moment. Not at the moment, but quite recently in a designated location that's in back of the Free Range restaurant, that area between Free Range and the park. It's the initial long, what do I want to call those?
The structural posts to hold.
Structural posts.
Sculptures.
Those are in the ground, working with a wonderful contractor, and the artist is, and got those hand dug and into the ground. And I think in next week we'll be seeing the sculptures dropped on top of those posts, and we'll see this getting finalized. So it's pretty exciting. That kind of segued or made this a little bit unnecessary, but just as a reminder, some background. In 2022, BPAC, with council's direction, we sent out a call to artists, and with the intent of getting a sculpture at the Basalt River Park, we did receive 6 proposals that came back to us, almost all of them being local. BPAC did recommend the proposal that was by local artist Gail Falwell. It was a Stay Human sculpture series. Rendering of it is at the left-hand side of the screen here. The right-hand side are figures that had been completed at a sports stadium in another state. So she's a pretty iconic, big-time artist that we are lucky to get at the town of Basalt to have at a river park. So at that time in 2022, council did direct staff to enter into a contract with the artist. That contract, or the proposal that was submitted, did include a plan to light the sculptures. And prior to this, even with the development of the Basalt River Park, prior to this sculpture even being envisioned, electrical was run to this area in anticipation of lighting whatever sculpture was chosen for that designated location. So the proposed lighting does involve 3 ground-level pole-mounted lights. They are uplit to shine at an angle, not directly uplit, but direct, at an angle to shine onto each one of the 3 sculptures. There's like 1 light per sculpture. The lights are adjustable. They're able to be locked into place. The proposal has included glare shields to further reduce the lighting field and prevent trespass past the area of the sculptures. We were looking to further reduce any unnecessary light pollution, of course. Lighting is proposed to be placed on timers, proposing to mirror the hours of the adjacent restaurant at the River Park. I mean, these could be extended at council staff's discretion, and if there's a big community event or something fun that we want to have at the park, but really we're trying to really reduce the amount of excess light in the park. However, these sculptures they really are iconic. It's a really exciting thing to have. It promotes Basalt's goal of enhancing our art identity within the region and within the state and the world. Adds a sense of placemaking and overall interest to the park. And BPAC really wishes to celebrate these sculptures to the amount possible. So this is why we're asking council to approve the resolution as drafted to allow this adjustment to be made to allow this uplighting in this particular location of the park. So Josh Mueller, who you all know as a participant on BPAC, one of our BPAC members, is actually a lighting design professional, works at Robert Singer and Associates, which is a local firm. And he has been working through this as well as working with the artist to ensure that this is done tastefully, that it's not excess light pollution, that this is done to the extent, just done in the right way, and it's meeting the criteria proposed by the code for that exemption. So Josh has created this graphic that he can speak to for that if you'd like, and you can ask him any questions you'd like.
It's very crude, so forgive that, but this sort of demonstrates the primary beam angle of the light source, that it's really just focused on the sculptures themselves.
Nice.
And so, being a design professional, when seeing Gail's original proposal, sort of offering my expertise to dial it in to really only light the sculptures themselves. So picking a fixture with a much more narrow beam spread, one that we can add glare shields onto it so it doesn't provide any excess light around it, or to anyone standing at ground level. So the person on the right, you can see that the field is just about at his head, and that would be standing at the very edge of that center circle there. So the goal is really to highlight this and accentuate the evening character of downtown Basalt, especially there at Free Range, making it a nice place to be in the evening, and highlight the art and have that as a focus, but without going too far in any other way. So, if you have any questions, happy
Will it look like the earlier photograph of the night scene?
Yes.
Like
Yeah,
that's-
so
that's-
that is the sort of expectation.
That's spectacular. Jeez. Really impressive.
There'll be a light for each of the 3 statues.
Yes, and they go across the circle, so there's the triangle shape of each one of them. Across the way is the uplight, and we have them as a stake mount fixture. So once the sculptures are in place, we'll go in and really dial it in and make sure that the sculptures look good and there's no excess light anywhere. So whether that's bringing the lights closer or further back in that circle, giving us the opportunity to dial it in and make it great.
How many are we gonna have 3?
3.
Yeah. And is that a computer simulation of the new Basalt Town Hall in the background there? That's kind of taking a shine to that building.
Are these LEDs?
Yes. And so they're, if you go to the next slide, I think they're 7 watts a piece, which is pennies a day, or a penny a day maybe. They're a 90 CRI, so they're very high color rendering, so it'll make it look correct. It won't wash it out or make it gray. The 10-degree beam and 640 lumens, which is essentially equivalent to maybe a 40-watt light bulb,
Yeah.
but focused solely on there. And with the additional beam enhancements and glare control, it'll reduce that down significantly.
Nice.
It can always be dimmed afterwards if they do go and it's too bright. We can always
Wow.
lower that down.
What's
And you can
the,
see here in the little, very tiny little white dot on the left is the size of the fixture. So I mean, they are,
Is that an approximation of how far they'll be off the ground?
yes, yeah, they're stake mounted. So there's no like berming of any landscape work in there, which I would imagine there would be.
Is there any worry about snow clearing and?
No, so with the stake mount, and all of the parts are replaceable if for some reason they were to get damaged, but with them being off from the sidewalk, we won't have to worry about a plow or anything hitting them.
Nice.
You haven't seen our plow drivers.
We'd also talked in the feedback meeting about these being a very affordable piece, so if, at some point when something does have to be replaced, we're not out, hundreds of dollars to replace these heads.
Are they low voltage or are they big?
Yes,
Oh,
yeah, they're 12 volt DC, so the transformer will be in the restroom building, and then the low voltage runs through the conduit that's already
Amazing.
pulled out
Cool.
there. So there's no worry if it were to get cut, you could lick the wires and you won't have shock. So there's no worry there about danger either. And they're very small. So right there where that pointer is that.
Did Mr. Singer review this plan and sign off?
He did not. He knows about it. He's very happy that I'm part of BPAC and Vice Chair. So we advised with the Carbondale roundabout sculpture lighting before my time.
Yeah. Great.
And that's been there for how long? So
what's the 3,000 Kelvin like as far as the color of the light? Like what is that like compared to?
It's not cracked yet.
It's cool.
It's
Warm.
It's warm. It's warm. Yeah. It's not like.
It's not like this. It's pretty
not
far
like
from
this.
this.
So the light that's already over there is likely at that 3,000 Kelvin.
Okay.
It's sort of, it would be a soft white bulb. You have one of those in your lamps. at home. 2700 gets to be a little bit warmer, and we can always add a filter if it does look too cool. We can add a filter that will change that color temperature down to a warmer tone.
Cool.
I think it's cool.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be opposed to trying it all night long like the rest of
Yeah.
the park lights, but that's just me.
All night long.
Yeah, I was looking in here to see
Enough
if it
all
said a specific end
Timer.
time.
Restaurant.
We kept it without putting it to a decisive end time, because I think, like I said, there might be some at times when we do have more programming in that park, there's more events, there's more, excitement coming around, and the restaurant's hours currently, I believe, are till 9, and so what if this is on till 10, so I didn't wanna marry it to that, specific use, or,
Well, and also
yeah,
the
use changes.
seasonality, the
Yeah.
sun is up later in the summer, and so if you're turning off the lights at 9, then you never even have the lights on.
Right, you're walking home from the Wednesday night concert series and the light comes on for this, and there's something nice about that too, because it provides a little extra, the feeling, there's a little bit more safety, security while you're walking around, to have just a little bit more light as people disperse throughout the park. So in the summertime, it's gonna take a while before you'd be able to see it. In the winter, it's beyond at 4:30 sometimes.
And what would the feeling be for the residential, on that corner?
So that's where the adjustability of them and movability is really to make sure that there is no light
Right.
trespassing into them.
Yeah.
We don't want them to feel like we're having a spotlight on them.
Right. Cool.
Okay.
Mayor, I move the town council adopt resolution number 36, series of 2023.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Nice work. They're gonna be beautiful. So, Mr. Honey's in the back of the room. These are our new kinetic sculptures for our river park. And if we'll talk, so they'd be available for a spectacularly high sum of money if you want to move them to call for a special occasion.
Why don't you plan around them, Ryan? Okay? That's what we're saying. Okay? Your next thing depends on this.
So, next item is resolution number 34, series of 2023, resolution of the Town Council of Basalt, Colorado, approving the transfer of arts RETA funds to the Arts Campus at Willits for the TCAW Endowment Fund. So, I think Ryan and Jeff are going to tee this up for us.
I'll introduce this one. Ryan Honey here from TCAW, and let him add a few words after I introduce it. Background with the development of Willits, there was a RETA, real estate transfer assessment, half of which was to go towards the support and development of an arts nonprofit, and later that became TCAW, the Arts Campus. Later that became TCAW, and so that money in the RETA has been used and dedicated to and used in support of TCAW in various ways. And over time, the town council has passed different funding resolutions for that authorize different uses of those funds, including construction of the facilities they have now, with the end goal being once the entity's formed, the building is built, that there would be an endowment there to support TCAW and into the future. And so we've kind of reached that point in time where the money in the Arts RETA can be transferred to the endowment fund. And the endowment fund has restrictions in that the TCAW, basically there'd be a transfer from the town's RETA to the endowment fund twice a year. And then TCAW could only take a certain amount of money out of the endowment fund for the authorized uses each year. There's limitations on that money can't be taken out of the endowment if it would cause the endowment fund to go below. In the resolution, it's $200,000, which is pretty low because there's significantly more money than that in the town's RETA account at the moment. And the investments that would be made with the money in the endowment fund would be, to then kind of continue to grow the endowment fund, are restricted in the same way as municipal investments. And so
we're, as I said, kind of now at that stage where the money can be transferred to the endowment fund. And this resolution both authorizes that and ensures that the restrictions on the investment and the use of the money are there and in place. And so, with that, Ryan, I'd kind of turn it over to you with
Sure.
anything else you might want to add.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I'm totally impressed because all the times I've presented before council, it's never been at the time that was on the calendar, so good job, everybody. Incredible.
Thank Pam.
Yes, well done. Yeah, I think Jeff summed it up really well in terms of the history of the RITA. We drained it down to nothing to build Takah as it stands today. It was about 1.3 million, which we drained down to zero in 2019, and now it's built back up. We'll be using 10% a year for operations, but there's money coming in from real estate transfers that will continue to grow the endowment. If we want to use more than 10% a year, we come back to council and explain, what it was before. It could be for future phases of the campus. It could be for capital improvements. It could be for a programmatic opportunity. But again, we would come back to council if we had a reason to draw down more than 10%. And another piece of great news about this setup with this arrangement that we have, we've enrolled the help of Ryan Investments, your new neighbor here, to manage the fund, and they're doing that pro bono, which is great. So they'll do monthly reports to us. Obviously, the investments are restricted per the municipal rules, and Ryan Investments is well aware of those, but we have financial professionals who are prepared to manage that as funds come in twice a year. They will put those in the appropriate investments per the regulations and provide reporting to us and then to all of you. So it's a pretty straightforward proposition, I think, and we're really excited to use that 10% a year for our programming to support the community, but also know the money's going to be in good hands with the professionals over at Ryan Investments supporting us, and again, at no cost to us or the town. So,
Yeah. Didn't we have one round of this before? Didn't we do?
We had provided some money to them
Yeah.
when they were under construction
Right.
out of the endowment. We also had provided some grand opening money
Right.
that allowed them to do some programming
was.
for
Okay.
2 years, I think it was.
Yeah.
And so now, that's sort of sunsetted, and now they're just at the point in maturity where this, the endowment's ready to be created
Yeah.
and
Great.
continue to grow for them.
All right. Questions?
Way to mature.
what's that?
I said way to mature.
We're all,
He's still working on it.
they grow up so fast, We just turned 2. Isn't that crazy? We had our second birthday.
Awesome.
Wow. So, yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank
Today
you
the
guys.
last day to vote for Mr. Basalt.
Today is the last day to vote for Mr. Basalt. And more importantly,
Which is
for-
also a sham. Ryan does not live in Basalt. He should not be Mr. Basalt.
But on the record,
Not for the 3rd year in a row. People out there. This is other Ryan.
that's right. There's Ryan Slack. You should concentrate your votes on Takah as best music venue, because we really would love to grab that one. So.
I'm gonna have to say I believe Basalt River Park is actually.
Also a
I mean,
contender.
I love you, but come
also
on.
a contender. Yes. Best indoor venue where we can share it.
Here we go.
Okay, if there are no questions, I entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move the town council adopt resolution number 34, series of 2023.
Second.
All right. Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. You
Thank
snuck
you.
through,
Congratulations,
snuck
thanks.
through again. Great.
Thanks for all the support, everybody.
Hey,
Thanks,
yeah,
Ryan.
well, great job. I mean,
Yeah, it's
Takah,
great.
just really fabulous summer out there.
Thanks.
Really, everything, just with fun stuff and
Good.
great spirit. So.
I'm going to go back and catch the end of our Aspen Words author talk. So thank you all.
Good. Okay. All right, so now we turn to the 2024 budget presentation, Doug and Jenny. Seems like I've seen this before, but
You may have.
4 hours ago.
All right. So I'll do a quick kickoff for it, and then we'll get into the numbers. But first of all, I just wanted to thank Jenny and Doug for the hard work. Thank staff for the hard work of getting all the numbers in. Thank council for the direction that we got at our retreat earlier this summer. I think what you have ahead of you here is an excellent budget for 2024. There's a lot of, great community investment that's going to occur, and, just continue the service provision that we have to the community as well. So one of the highlights for this year, you can kind of see the budget itself looks different. We have this ClearGov program that we're now using, and we've gone in the past with using spreadsheets and Excel, which certainly served us well over time. But this just allows for, I think, a little bit more clarity and transparency that we've been working hard toward over a number of years. It will be on the website, so people can kind of pick and choose what they want to look at in the budget instead of having to scroll through an entire budget. So it's pretty slick in that way. And then finally, I would just mention that it's really handy for staff, because as we maybe change numbers in there, that kind of ripples throughout the budget. So all of those formulas and things like that are in there. So it kind of leaves out, helps with mistakes and things like that in the budget. So with that, I will say that on the thumbnails up there, you can kind of get into the introduction of the budget, which is sort of the background. That's pretty standard for what we have each year in the budget. Under the budget overview itself, which is the next thumbnail, one of the things that we added a few years ago was our strategic framework, and in particular our work plans for each year. Those work plans are created from council direction. They're created from staff and the community. We take some of our steps from the 2020 master plan, other policy documents like the post master plan, things along those lines that really help to inform the budget or inform that work plan, and then we budget against it. So this is a really great way to create the path of breadcrumbs that lead us to executing on the things that we heard from the community and council. And I will just touch briefly on a couple personnel changes, and then I'll let the number folks kind of take over from there. But we did add 1.5 FTE in this next year's budget. The investigator position in the PD was one of those. This has been something that's asked for a few years now, and I support this wholeheartedly. Had a lot of discussions with Chief about it, and it's just something that we've reached that place in time where in order to continue to provide that service and really dig deep with some of the bigger cases that we have here, to follow through on them and hopefully get a good resolution. So we also have an events planner. As you know, we had an awesome concert series this year. We had our the summer Sunday market, and then we have our tree lighting coming up, and there's probably going to be more as we kind of mature into these new spaces that we've built. And so this will just kind of help to alleviate some of planning staff. We had Alec on our planning staff doing quite a bit of that, and we're really wanting to make sure to get him into focusing on planning things as well. So not just an events planner for us. So we think this will just help us execute much better on that. And it'll be a great liaison sort of between PD and our public works folks to be able to, again, put on great shows and events. And then really quickly with regard to staffing, as far as changes to salaries and things like that, Jenny, if you want to go to that page, there are a couple things there I'll just briefly touch on. So we had a very good savings and got a refund from our health insurance. We're only seeing an increase by 2% this year in all of our fringe benefits, which is pretty amazing. And so in the past, we've put money towards health premiums for people, but this year we're doing it a little differently. We'd open flex spending accounts for each employee and put $500 in there. They can use that for eyeglasses, doctor's appointments, medication, things like that. We're looking at a 6% COLA, or cost of living increase for employees that we believe is tracking well with what we're seeing in the valley and the state, and basically staying competitive in the marketplace to both recruit and retain employees. We will be looking at a salary survey this year. It's just something you do every few years. Last year we did it for the police department. This next year we would do it for the remainder of staff. And really the thrust on this one is benchmarking employee salaries and against what we're seeing against other government government positions and some private as well. So it's just a useful tool for us to understand kind of where we are. And then we do have one addition to our public works employees for their uniforms. Those are taxable, seen as taxable benefits. So since they will be taxed on it, we'll take it from $300 to $600 a year, so they can still kind of keep that same quality of clothing that they wear throughout the year. And then lastly, we would add a holiday, which would be Juneteenth. That's in June, on June 19th, I believe it is, and stays competitive with what we're seeing in the region as far as number of holidays. So that would bring us to a total of 11. So with that, if you have any questions, happy to answer them. But in the interest of time, I think we'll switch to the numbers.
Quick question for the investigator. If you,
Sure.
just what the responsibilities of that role would be and how that'll impact the rest of the officers.
Yeah, that's great. So this person will focus wholly on investigations and probably on the bigger hitting, crimes and things like that we do see. We do have bad things that happen in town, and our officers cover those responsibilities now. But when some of the line officers, like police officer 1, 2, that are to be out on patrol and doing some of the community policing, we really want to see them more out on patrol and doing that job as opposed to spending their time in the office doing follow-up and investigation work that we can dedicate somebody to. So I think it kind of holds true to our philosophy on policing, that we're out and about and visible, and we'll just allow that to happen more. As we know, we've grown. We're seeing a lot more people, and that also includes people coming up and down the valley that we come into contact with, people using our retail outlets and all those kind of things. Just kind of creates more issues over time, and those are things that we want to make sure we're staying on top of and not falling behind.
So one final point on the personnel front is that we did also look at what percentage of the general fund for personnel relates to the total revenue for financing. And we did, the number is 45%, which is on the low end of the range. We did do the survey amongst other municipalities, towns, and cities. And it's a little nuanced. You can kind of get involved, go down a rabbit hole on a lot of these, but generally the number is over 50%. So we're well within a 45% range of the personnel not exceeding revenue before financing. Again, just conservative on how we're looking at payroll.
And that's fully burdened after the COLA?
Fully loaded.
After COLA?
Fully loaded. All the personnel costs are fully loaded. So let's jump into the fund summary here, which should all look somewhat familiar here to you. Can you hear me okay, Bill?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Much of the activity is in the general and restricted funds. That's where all the meat and potatoes are, which we'll spend much of our time on. Going across the board here is the capital construction fund, is what is executing in the bond proceeds that we took in 2022, tax exempt and taxable, for the Midland Streetscape project, the Green project, and affordable housing. So that will be executed with the capital construction fund. And we'll have a lot to say about that towards the end as we go through the numbers. The water fund is a separate enterprise fund of the town. It's pretty much unremarkable here as a presentation. We have done a study of our infrastructure to see whether or not what we have as far as source, treatment, distribution, point of sale, registering of sales is in fact going to carry the day over the period of time, the next 10, 15 years. And there is a study being done. We're not at the final finish line here as far as having what those findings will be. But nonetheless, we'll likely have more to be said about that when we get the final report and looking at what capital needs will be for the water fund. Moving on to the Conservation Trust Fund, this is the fund that's dedicated to be the recipient of some of the, when you buy a lottery ticket, percentage of the lottery ticket proceeds go into this Conservation Trust Fund. It's about $25,000 over the course of the year, and that's dedicated for really parks maintenance. And that's thrown into the hopper, and that's really under the auspices of Chris Beiser in executing those funds. You have the HOA fund, which is really, since we own so much of that Gold Rivers Plaza, we own basically all the units except the commercial. We're treated accounting-wise as a separate fund. So all of the debits and credits run through a separate fund for that. So you can count money in, money out on that. Pretty unremarkable as well. And then rounding out the rest of the funds would be the bond fund, which is what, when the mill levy comes in, portion goes to the general operating funds of the town, general fund, and a portion goes to the debt service for our general obligation bonds. And that's $950. That's a set number, and that also includes a little bit of admin. We have $950 in taxes that covers the debt service, also covers the admin. So pretty much money in, money out. We get towards the end of the presentation here, I get a little bit of a slide on the overall debt picture of the town. So we'll talk a little bit more about that at that time. So jumping in now to the general fund, you'll see that, let's just go right to revenue here. So this is the revenue. I love this program, I really do, but we can't lock the titles here, so you have to kind of focus here. That this middle one is the 23 projected 24 budget, so when you page down, you might lose a little visibility to that. But what I'll just talk about here now, frankly, are the big differences between where we're going to net out and where we're going, okay? And you'll see that I'm budgeting much more in property tax in 2024 versus 23. This is because we know everybody's assessments have gone up. You know, we receive about 2/3 of our revenue from Eagle and 1/3 from Pitkin. And of those real estate taxes, I'd say about 70% drop in here in the general fund, and then another portion drops over to the bond fund. So total all in, we're about maybe, this is actually more than 2 million, it's like 2.8 million of revenue in 2024. $1.9 million going to the general fund, $950 going to the bond fund, so all in. That will very well change with Double H. The proposition Double H would call for limiting on how much increase there can be, increasing the homestead exemptions for people owning homes, and actually just property tax across the board. And what with Double H would give with one hand, they're going to take away the other for the town, is that they would also allow the state to use some of the Tabor money to backfill some of the deficiencies the local governments would experience in the dilution of sales tax collections. It also changes the timing of when things are due. Right now, we have to certify the mill levy December 15th. That would change to December 28th, really convenient time. And then we'd actually have to get the budget signed off on January 5th. So it's a little bit cockeyed right now. I don't know whether or not it passes or not, but if it does, we'll be prepared. And when we sit to actually approve this budget in November, we'll know where we net out on Double H. So we'll have a better number there. You'll see that I took our sales tax number down. I've been talking about this the last several meetings. We budgeted a flat number in 23 versus 22, and I did think that we're not going to make that number. I still believe we won't, so I took it down to 300,000. You'll see as projected for the year. May not be that bad, but it could be. Principally because Pitkin has changed the methodology by which they distribute property taxes for Pitkin County. We're getting less than we have in the past, and it's about a $300,000 hit to us. So that's reflective in the 2023 number. I took 24 down even further because there's a lot of macro issues going against us right now. I mean, the interest rates are higher. 10-year has inched up to, I mean, it wasn't too long ago, it was like 0.7%. Now it's well north of 4.5. It was like, last week it was up to 4.90. So rates are higher, and they're going to be higher for longer. The yield curve was very much inverted. It's becoming now flattened. And I think you're going to see the pressure on the long end just create a bit of a stress on people's budgets. So I think that, and then there's a whole mess going on in Washington right now with McCarthy being ousted as the speaker, and then is there going to be a shutdown here November 15th when the 45 days runs out? Just got the whole thing going on with Israel right now. So there's just a lot of right now.
Serious
going on
thing.
in the market. A lot of uncertainty. The market can handle anything but uncertainty, and right now we got all uncertainty. So that right now there's a lot of for just projecting out revenue. It's not the time in my view to be bullish. So that's the macro view. Now the micro view, here in the town, I think about sales tax, and we have 60% of our revenue, or sales tax collected directly from the state, is from retail food and the retail sales excluding liquor. So you take those sales, that's, retail sales are discretionary, buying groceries aren't. So one's a sturdier number than the other. You look at utilities and retail for liquor, those are pretty sturdy numbers. That compares pretty comparable to what restaurant sales are. So, again, restaurants is somewhat discretionary. Retail liquor hasn't really moved. That's actually a pretty sturdy number even through COVID. And utilities, pretty sturdy number. So there's like a yin and a yang going with those two. And then you've got building is definitely on a decline, but lodging has been good. So there's a little bit of both. You've got some things going for us, got some things going against us. And so what I did, and I got a 100% chance of being wrong, but I think generally directionally correct, is I took a higher number than 21 but lower than 22. We're not going to make 22, but I took a little higher number than 21 because we're easily beating 21. That's what I ended up going with. 6850 is a revenue number, which is really splitting the Solomon, split the baby in half, just took the difference between 21 and 22 and said that's what our sales tax revenue is going to be. Pretty much offsets whatever sort of increase we're going to get on the property tax. So no blood. Looking further at our revenue features, picture, you'll see that our building permits is really going downward. It's not a hockey stick, it's going the other way. Where it was just south of $1 million, we're now pedaling at something like 250. And you think about that, I mean, that's a pretty good drop. But then we look at about what's going on in 2024, I was pretty dour, probably too dour, because I talked to James, and he informed, we got BCC, got that coming online. They'll be pulling permits at some point. Response to the shelter for domestic abuse, they'll be pulling shelters at some permits at some point. We've got storage unit over by the high school, building 4, that is coming online at some point. We have Cypress Meadows, keep me up.
Park Modern, Lake Modern.
Yeah, Cypress Meadows is parcel 5. We've got some building going on there. We got some lots over in Stotts Mill that would be developed. We also have Lake Modern with building 9 with 155 units coming on board. So we've got some things going for us. But I really just basically put 0 up on the board because I think rates are high. I think they're going higher, and I think it's going to create a lot of stress, frankly. So I just again err on the side of caution. I took that building permit revenue way down. Time will adjudicate the answer, but I believe that's a conservatively based number. Paging through the rest of the variances, a little spoiler alert here. We did receive $430,000 from the tree farm that we had, the town actually had paid and subsidized the underground walkway at Willits. eligible, actually, I think it was. And the town fronted that money. We were reimbursed, we being the town, were reimbursed half of that years ago, and there was a remaining amount that was actually dispersed to us recently, is $430,000. So that comes in, that's a good win for us. We'll do a budget amendment for that, taking that into income, but we won't budget that for 2024. Rounding this out is our interest earnings. You know, we started the year, gosh, with like $120,000 as interest. You know, the rates were still relatively low, and then they've been on a runaway train. So we took it up to 600, like in June, and we're sporting close to, $90,000 a month on interest right now. So we're short end of the market right now. It's like 5.5, 5.6, and so I believe we can put $1 million up on the board next year's revenue. So that'll be a favorable comparison to budget. So all in, when you go through all the math here, I see the budgeted revenue being 10.7, which is about $500,000 better than what we budgeted. But once we do our budget amendment for the tree farm money, we'll basically be right on track. And I believe that number will prevail. I mean, it's only October right now. I haven't gone through and combed out all of the third quarter adjustments yet, but I believe we'll hit that number. Any questions?
I just have one quick one on Picken County distributing. Is that the property tax or is that sales tax?
Sales tax.
So,
There was an ordinance done in 1978 that said that Pitkin County would keep 57% of the county tax they collect and disperse 43% to the city of Aspen, Snowmass, and Basalt. And there was a formula that was done at the time that was not in, after they looked at it, the new finance director up in, I guess, Pitkin County looked at it, was not in accordance with what the ballot had indicated that the allocation should be. So they recalibrated the numbers, and then we came out on the short end of the equation.
And it's based kind of on the pro rata share of collections in each of those municipalities. So to the extent Aspen is way higher, and we're lower, and it's not for the entire town of Basalt, it's for the Picken County.
yeah, the section that's in Picken County.
7-Eleven.
Yeah.
Studies. Spend a lot of money on 7-Eleven.
Right. We're getting a fair amount of money.
Yeah.
But just comparably speaking, it's aggregate, it's gonna be like a $300,000 hit.
Okay.
So, anyway, good question, thank you. All right, so let's look at, let's just go to the fund balance. You wanna do the fund balance, or you wanna do
Up to you.
let's do the fund balance? Because I wanna just mention the expenses. I gotta tell you, I've worked at a lot of different places, and I believe we have very good expense management of our expenditures. We go every month, department heads get their accounting of their expenditures. It's cumulative, capital and operating. There's no departments experiencing stress on their numbers. If anything, we're under. And I think the reason we're under is a lot of the capital that's not being deployed this year will be deployed next year. So we're not really out of bounds on any of our expenditures or capital. We go through capital, we meet with all the department heads, we go through, we distinguish what at least what I think is the difference between a need and a want, and then we meet as a group. And it's not like a Shark Tank group, but as a collaborative group to go through all those departments, kind of where we're netting out, we decide what we're gonna be deploying our capital on. And I believe that this is a good process we went through this year, and that's how we came up with our numbers. So what I want to show here, so I don't really spend a lot, we can go through all the departments and go line by line, but that would take many hours here. So I just want to go to the headline here, and this page down just a minute or two. So you have to remember that this is what we thought we'd be when we did this budget. We thought this year that we'd be a negative 1.5 million, we'd be in the hole by $1.5 million. But that our balances in our fund would be just south of 9 million. I recall we have a reserve policy that says we're not allowed to spend more than 40% of our 3-year rolling average of expenditures. So we have money for payroll, we have money for OpEx, right? And that's our reserve policy. For $4 million, that has already been embargoed. I pulled that out of Alpine Bank. I pulled it out. It's actually invested separately. It's invested in treasuries. It's invested in agency paper, CDs. It's well diverse. There's no credit risk in anything that we've got. There's just some interest rate risk as we went out a little bit on the long end of the curve. We're like a 4-year duration. We're picking up in anticipation of rates coming down. We're trying to lock in some rates now. Okay, so the $4 million is locked in. We still have $5 million of dry powder. When I go through the math here, I also budgeted, just page up just a minute here. I'm gonna give Brian a seizure here, sorry. $1,269,190, we're taking out of the current year budget and putting that over the construction fund for Midland. Okay. To make the comparisons equal, I'm also taking $1,200,000 in 2024. So we're really pulling out $1,200,000 23, $1,200,000 in 24. By the way, in 2022 we pulled out $455,000 because that was the town's matching grant on the CDOT grant. We got $500,000 of a grant for Midland, and then we put up our matching dollars of $455,000. So collectively, out of the general fund, in 22, 23, budgeted for 24, basically pulling $3 million out and we're running it through operations. And by doing so, let's secure this thing. So by doing so, we're like, we're at the end of the rainbow here. We're gonna be at $8.9 million, which is really kind of where we thought we'd be last year at this time. So I'm like looking at 14 months. So, as I think, it's like the headline is that we're not diluting the equity of the general fund for the sake of funding Midland. You know, if we were a business, you know, we would want to be accumulating money, but we're not a business, we're a government, and we're taking the money that we have and we're making investments in the town. So this is one of the investments we're making here in the town. And we're not doing so at the expense of anything else, because we're still holding our own on our general fund. And you'll see the same story happens with the restricted fund. You want to go to that for a minute? Go to the next page. Restricted, yeah. Any questions on that? So on the restricted fund, this is principally, you know, post, which is just a function of 1/3 of our sales tax collections from the state, cigarette tax, and lodging tax. And those are pretty sticky numbers. Because I took down sales tax, you'll see that the budgeted number for 2024 is less than 23. Makes sense, because we took the number down. The big difference here in revenue, you'll know this year we had a lot of bell ringers. We had that element sale that was just a big windfall for us. That's not going to be recurring. There's been a lot of transactions, a lot of real estate, a lot of RETA money coming in this year. And we have it again this year. James helped formulate what his view on what some of these numbers were going to be, along with Michelle and some others. And so our educated guess on what we think, these are all transactionally based. So you don't necessarily know for sure if they're going to happen or not. And with rates going up, you know, they may or may not happen, but cash deals will always happen. So anyway, the big difference here is that the park dedication fees, I'm putting something in here for that. That will be triggered by Sopers Meadows and BCC. So when those permits get pulled, there's some obligations there to the developer to afford park dedication. So that'll be found money for us in 2024. I don't have anything expensed against it, so we don't get it. We don't have it, but we'll have it when these permits get pulled. So you'll see that the revenue here is significantly different. So I took down Rita's. I also have in here, you see at 1350, I also have in here a subtraction from current year operations, or 24 budget operations, $1,350,000. And this is a combination of pulling money from post, pulling money from the lodging tax. Here we go. You know, when I started this thing about a year ago, I hadn't had these restricted funds. I had no idea what was going on, to be honest with you, a year ago at this time. So I had to like boil the ocean here and say, what are all these funds? What are we doing? And so I was just trying to categorize them. This is a boil the ocean for me, trying to make it simple. So you got 30 funds. 3 of the funds are the post, tobacco, and lodging. Okay, that makes sense. I follow that. 9 of them are Ritas. There could be Roaring Fork Club, there could be Rita 1, it could be Rita 2, there could be Basalt River Park, it could be Cypress Meadows, Stotts Mills, all these Ritas, that's all transactional based that would generate revenue. And everything else dropping down are pretty much impact fees
Pretty nice.
that we would be generating in the way of revenue. So I was just trying to, again, this is probably for my benefit really more than anything, is trying to understand everything and not to see if I was missing anything. But you'll see where the revenue is coming from. 90% of the revenue is coming from those first 2 lines. And embedded in those REITs are the ability of the town to use those monies for capital investments. So it's Rita 1, Rita 2, Cypress Meadows. So some of those REITs were pulling money out of the retained earnings of those funds to fund Midland. Believe that there's money in post. You'll see a lot of the landscaping and the streetscaping projects that are considered open space would qualify as an investment that we can make with our post money. There's marketing money that's being spent on this whole project. That's a dedicated use of the lodging money. So we have reasons to believe that there's money that we can pull from these funds. Last but not least, there's an impact fee for parking downtown that had some money in it. So we're pulling money out of those restricted funds to help bridge the difference between what Midland will ultimately cost and what we actually have here in funding. And I'll get to the end. We'll finish on those high points on Midland. So I think that's
Maybe
much
the fund
of-
balance on,
I'm sorry?
fund balance.
So yeah, so when I read that, thank you. So in the general fund, made the analogy that they're basically the same spot. So we were doing this budget, we did our amendments. We thought we'd spend $1.5 million more than we took in, and that our fund balances and our restricted funds aggregate $6 million. When you run through all the, this is how we're gonna end for the year, there's gonna be no blood. I feel like this actually probably gonna be positive. But right now, no blood. So we're actually gonna be starting the year or 2 months from now at $7.4 million. I have basically a loss here of $1 million in 2024, principally driven by the money we're pulling out of the restricted funds. And then we're gonna have $6.4 million, my crystal ball, 14 months, we'll say, well, $6.4 million in restricted capital versus what we thought we'd have is 5.9 a year ago. So again, anecdotal evidence that, we're not diluting the equity of the restricted fund. We're certainly not the general fund. Here, we're actually 500 to the better. And I do think, when I get finished going through third quarter, that we will show better than a negative loss. I think we'll be in the black. I think that will be a positive number. So there you go. That's pretty much the restricted fund. Any questions on that? Going by memory here. So let's go to debt, right? And then bring it home with Midland. So I'm going to talk a minute about debt, because that's as important as equity of the town. So this schedule is intended to just, boil the ocean, it's not that much to boil. G&Os, or general obligations debts, but right now we have, as we speak, we still have our 1993 bond obligation that was taken out 20 years ago. That's the last payment is made December, so that will be gone. And what will remain is our debt service on our taxable and tax exempt bonds. And if you're being a good listener, we're taking $900,000 out of that mill levy, and that's what the $900,000 is covering, principal and interest on our general obligation debt. That runs to the year 2046. It's a 25-year bogey on those bonds, and that'll just be our run out between now and 2046. I'll be gone by then, but the payments will continue. See, certificates of participation, there are 3. There was one that was issued in 2119 for $2.2 million. That was the Tabor refunds, and that has a 10-year payout. So that's being drawn on. That's part of the principal obligations that we're making here. This $1 million, about 220,000 ish, relates to the Tabor bond refunds. Second certificate of participation was in 2021, when we bought Albany Park, or we renovated Albany Park. It was for $2,116,000. That was a 5-year certificate of participation. That pays out, last payment on that is 2025.
That's a swimming pool?
Yeah, cool.
And that obligation's been basically running like $400,000 a year. Now, Mayor, are you with me?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the last one was the certificate of participation for the purchase of the police department public works building. That was $1,337,000. That was a 3-year payout. So we're in the second year. 24 is the second year of that. 25 will be the final year of that. The reason I say that is that after 25, we're going to free up about $400,000 of cash, and then followed by the next year, we'll free up about another $400,000 in cash. So that 2.2, that Tabor refund will stay with us for a while. But we should have about $800,000 of free cash to be used for a number of things. But we wanted to think about how we want to fund the public works building and what that ultimately would be. That could represent, depending on what interest rates are at, that could represent $12.5 to $13 million of borrowing at a 4% coupon rate. Whether it be 4% or not, but that's a borrowing proxy for a build out. We also have cash in the general fund. Remember, we still have like $9 million of general fund reserves. We've embargoed $4 million, twice as much as the policy is requiring. So we could use some of the excess money in the general fund to actually make an investment in the public works building. So we'll see. That's get a little ahead of myself. I'm just kind of thinking, where we're going versus kind of where we're at right now. This is kind of some general thoughts. All right, so let's go to the Midland summary, because there's been a lot of talk, or at least I heard a lot of talk, about maybe we were using some of the affordable housing money or the green money for the benefit of Midland. And that's absolutely wrong. That's absolutely untrue. Yeah. And that what this is going to do is recap the bond offering for Midland, which is the tax-exempt bonds. $9,545,000 was the offering of what the town netted. That was 2022. Over a 3-year period between now and the end of the year, we should be netting about $500,000 of interest. We're sporting like a 5% return, and those bonds were tax-exempt bonds. Were like south of 2% of what we were paying. So we had a pretty good delta on what we were earning, money earned versus what we were paying earned. So we were actually, that was better lucky than good, I guess, right? But we had good timing of actually issuing these bonds. So 500 is for us, and so we're up to 10 million now. And we add to the 10 million these fund transfers I talked about. So the general fund transfer, remember, it was 455 in 2022, 1269,100 in 2023, 1269,100 in 2024. All that adds up to 2.9 million. And then we also are pulling $1,350,000 from the restricted fund. So all of that, soup to nuts, is 4.3 million. So really, the 4.3, the 9.5, the 5, all of that adds up to just slightly, it's like 14.4 million. Now we add to this funding all of the cats and dogs we have as far as grants we've been able to secure and all the cost sharing arrangements. So ARPA money was COVID money, COVID relief, that we took in 2022, and that was basically to fund the water infrastructure up and down Midland. Okay, we had some, the state, oil was high at one point, right? It was a pretty good number. And there were some severance taxes that the state was collecting because taxes were higher that we benefited from, and we then took that windfall and put it into the construction fund. There was also a little delta on the interest rate when we actually closed on the bonds versus what we thought we'd get. So we got a little kicker on our interest when we closed. So that was a little bit of a windfall. That's in the severance taxes and interest. And not a big number, but better than nothing. And then CDOT, we had a $500,000 grant, and then that has been increased. Catherine's, she was leading the way on getting that up to $250. So now we got $750 up on the board for CDOT. And then Pitkin is kicking in some money for fiber. And then we also have some fiber coming in from Dole. So this is, we've already basically ripped up downtown, we're putting conduit below, so some of it is gonna be conduit for fiber. And then rounding out Holy Cross Energy is also gonna be kicking in cost of, it's not a grant, but it's really cost sharing. They're gonna kick in $550,000 for conduit that's gonna be laid. That would be what they would actually put their, what they would take all of their electrical that's currently overhead, put it underground, they would have that ready to go. So they're gonna actually reimburse us for that now. So all of that is money for us, I say us, for the town. Now we're up to $17 million of power, which is a little bit higher than what we talked about in June. But this is kind of where we're at right now, 17 million. And then, how do we spend it? Where did the money go? Funding expenditures. Well, we did have some closing costs associated with buying these bonds, and that was a cost, so be it. We also have some administrative costs associated with carrying this fund. And then you look at 2022 actuals, we had $1,095,000 out the door, and that was principally soft costs related to planning this work in Midland. 2023, I'm showing 6804.57. I guess I could have used round numbers, but that was where I thought we'd net out cash-wise between now and the end of the year, okay? That's got a pretty good chance of being wrong too, because it's directionally correct. I believe it's gonna be directionally correct. Exactly right? No. Okay. Now what do we have? We have what's to come. We have, there's still $600,000, $8.6 million. That's really, I look at that as two parts. One is there's a Stutzman proposal coming November 7th. Okay? And that is like the firewall, the hard line, not to exceed number that we need to get from Stutzman to make this work. 600,000 is a cost that we've already incurred. We've already signed off on some things with Connect One tonight. You know, some of these things that are actually in the pipeline that we're gonna have to pay for. So this is really indicative of cash out the door that's coming, but it's already committed costs. So 8 million is really the firewall, third rail, if you will. And then we debated that what's the contingency? Our 8 million. And what we came up with 15% of the contingency of 8, so 15 times 8, 15% times 8 is 1.2 million. So you add up the 1095, why don't you just hover over that for a minute? 1095 to 1.2, what do we got? It's 17.7. Now, that's a curious number, because when we did this article, there was an article Scott Condon did in July. It was very good. It was the numbers were right. A lot of times numbers aren't always accurately displayed, but he did a nice job. We said the number was going to be between 17.2 and 18.2. That was what we said. 17.7 just happens to be right in the middle. Okay, so that's what we're targeting. And then after all of that, all this goes according to Hoyle, we're going to still be short. We're going to still be short $900,000. And then we're gonna have to say how we're gonna fund that. Well, we have mechanisms to fund. We have money we can still take from the general fund. We have money we can take from the restricted fund. By the way, I think we're gonna do better than I'm projecting. We may have money out of the current year that we can take. So it'll be a bit of a, it's hard to do this. This is take one of the budget. It's hard to know for sure where the number's gonna land because there's a lot gap between now and a month from now. But my guess is that we're gonna be south of $1 million, we're gonna be on this number, and that will ultimately pull some from the restricted funds, the general fund, and probably current year, because I think we're gonna do better than current year than what I'm showing here. When we do that, you wanna go to the construction fund, the last slide? So we pull that 900,000.
Wait, can you go back for 1 second?
Sure.
You kept saying 17.7, and I'm saying 17.9.
Yeah,
Because
of
of
that 218,000. This is the project
It's
cost.
not including the both.
Yeah, it's not
There's
including
two
the
numbers
bond
in
cost.
both, 218 and 11.
See this number down here, Denise? Which number again?
He's just showing the
So he's
exact product cost.
subtracting out the closing costs for the bond. So the pure the pure cost of
Okay.
the
Construction.
Midland project.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And that's what we talked about. I mean, we didn't, the whole construct of the bond offering wasn't even mentioned in the article in July.
Got it. And then one other question. It's possible that we won't use the full contingency.
Correct.
That's right.
Yes. That's absolutely right.
We've been tracking thus far, I believe it's somewhere between 3 and 5% on contingency for the first phase. And so 15% feels pretty conservative. I think the benefit of what we're learning in the ground now as we're doing the water line is figuring out in real time where all the hidden things might be underground. So when we come back to start construction in the spring, we're going to have a lot more information about where things are, and I think that's just going to improve efficiency for the contract team, and hopefully make that contingency number that much more conservative.
And
So-
be going that deep.
And we will not be going that deep. Right. It's all shallow utilities and surface improvements from here on out.
So to play it back, our contingency before we used 3 to 5% on a phase of the project with the lion's share of the risk. So 15% seems really conservative. Like, you know what I mean? Because like,
Good.
yeah,
Yep.
Well, it may
That's right.
be too much, but we also,
I don't think it's too much, but I just want it.
but it's pretty
For the
safe.
sake of argument, that it's possible that we won't use it all.
correct. That's absolutely correct.
The other thing is, maybe I'm missing something, but, our reserve policy calls for keeping $4 million on hand. That fund balance is about $10 million. It seems like it would be a pretty easy move to move, if the gap is 915K, that's a pretty painless way to make up the difference. So instead of having 250% of our required reserve, so then we're 225%. So it's, I don't know, that's where I would be leaning.
If you look at the time scale, in 2021, we were making $8,000 a year in interest. We're now making $1 million.
Yeah,
So,
right.
there's a big plus in that as well.
Right,
That's right.
right.
And I think that was the point that we were trying to make, is that beyond what we've set aside as a rainy day fund, we have this bucket of dry powder in both the general fund and the restricted fund, and an appropriate use for that is reinvestment in the community and one-time expenses into capital. And I think that's, proven to be, a good strategy for us. As Doug said, we're a government. We're not in the business to show profit. We're in the business of providing services and investment in the community.
And this is a really good investment.
So that's where we're at. So next steps will be, I'm gonna comb through third quarter. I'm gonna get those numbers tighter. This is a tighter budget, I think, than we had last year. Then we'll be looking to see where we net out on the election, see where Double H drops out. And then we'll look at what the Stutzman number is going to be. And then whatever that gap is, if it's 8 million, we want to run with 15%, and we have we can, I guess, debate that. But whatever that gap is, we'll run that through the budget. We'll have that be a budgeted item. We won't do that as a budget amendment. So we'll run that through the machinations here of the fund itself. And you'll see this again. What I anticipate showing is this is the starting point, this is take one. And when we finish this thing, I guess, a month or so from now, we'll have take two. So I'll do a little bridge between how we get from point A to point B. I don't think there's gonna be a lot of differences. I honestly don't.
Real quick, just for public benefits, can you click on the capital improvement? Just so everybody, if they're watching, they see exactly where you're pulling these numbers.
Oh, for this?
For, the capital construction fund that.
So the capital construction, thank you, Glenn. So, so I was gonna do this. So remember when I said that, this is a really busy page, Because really what it's doing is capturing affordable housing, it's capturing the green project, it's capturing Midland, okay? When you go up the top here just a little bit. All right, so you go through here, now this is 22, 23, 24. You look at these things, boy, there's a little brain damage going on here. But I can summarize it and say this, that we had $6 million of that bond offering, of the taxable bond offerings for affordable housing. We have spent $800,000 for the lots at Stotts Mill. So we have $5.2 million in cash, plus some, because that $5.2 million, I've been rolling 6-month T-bills. That's a good sweet spot on the yield curve right now, so that's kicking me out like 5.5% interest. So that 5.2 is more than 5.2. Number one, headline. Number two is we had 2.1 million for the green project. Now we've spent, we're under contract with McKinstry to do all of the solar roofing at our Public Works building, and then the 5 Roaring Fork School District's properties. And I guess the high school is not considered a roof; it's on the ground, right? That's $1.7 million. All right, so that would, if we just stopped the music there, we'd still have $400,000 of cash, free cash. But we are going to get credits on that solar project from DOLA for $574,000. So right now, you're 574 plus another 4, call it $1 million of other cash now we're going to have in the green fund. Plus, we could ultimately get, and I believe we'll get, there's some federal tax credits for the Inflation Reduction Act, direct pay credits that we can get 20% credit on the $1.7 million project, which is around $340, $350-ish in extra dollars. So I think at the end of the day, we're going to have more money for the green project when we start harvesting these credits. We have dry powder for affordable housing. And then if we fund the gap, if what you're seeing tonight happens to be what we end up with, we'll kick another $900,000 into the construction fund, and we'll have almost $1 million in there. We'll certainly have $900,000 more in the construction fund. Why? Because I've only shown 6 million in, 6 million out on affordable housing, so there's more money for affordable housing. I've shown 2.1 million coming in for green, I've shown 2.1 going out. There'll be more money for green. So I just really feel very comfortable with the fund balances and where they're netting out, and how we've embargoed and separated. It's like a hard, there's a hard wall, a firewall between the Midland money, the affordable housing money, and the green money. And what you saw at Midland is what I'll be able to illustrate for the affordable housing and the green when the time comes. So does that answer your question?
Very good.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for asking.
Yeah, it's an economic miracle when you borrow money at 1.8%. And you loan it at 5.5%. I can see.
Unless
That's
you're
a
the
nice
federal
way to
government-
make a living.
Unless you're the federal government, 20% of your budget is going to be interest.
All right.
So there you go. That's why. So we'll see what happens with another month from now. We'll be presenting this. I guess it's last week in November.
Yeah, the 28th.
28th. So it's a little bit more than that, like 6 weeks from now. So if
Well,
any
commend the
questions,
staff on this. This is very clear, and I think the software, the ClearGov, was really worthwhile
She
investment.
did a great job pulling this together.
Yeah.
She had Herculean effort last year doing this. Because I was like day 2 on the job when I started when we were doing this last year. So she really carried the water last year and this year pulling this together. So she takes hats off to her.
This was fun to do, though.
Nice job.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is great.
So that's it.
Good work, you guys. Thanks.
Thanks.
Any questions, counselors?
No?
Anybody want to go home?
Sure.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Everybody adjourned.